What instances have you observed of wealthy people who have lost touch with reality? I've had a few friends who have worked in jobs that required dealing with people who were wealthy, sometimes very wealthy. Some of the things I've heard are quite funny, bizarre, sad, and want to hear what stories others may have. I wasn't there, but my friend told me how one of his classmates said, "I feel sorry for them, because they have a budget," in reference to a couple planning a wedding. I work in live entertainment, and I've worked a few lavish weddings before. There was one wedding in particular that stands out. It was at a downtown hotel. The client was a wealthy Russian businessman, though we're pretty sure that he was actually a high-ranking mobster. His daughter was getting married, and he was paying for everything. They had rented out the entire floor of the hotel. They had planned to split the banquet hall in half. One half would be the wedding ceremony, then they'd all go next door for the reception. But the hotel had double booked. We were supposed to start loading in our equipment. They were having a full-sized concert for the reception at 1 p.m., but there was a fundraising, awards banquet in the same room until 3. They were already going full steam ahead when we got there at noon, so we were essentially locked out of the venue until they finished and their crowd cleared out. Well, this put us in a pretty big bind. The doors for the wedding were scheduled to open at 4 p.m. The load-in would have been rushed, even if we could get in at the scheduled time. There was no way we were going to be set up on time unless the fundraiser got out of there now. So what does the father do? He walks up to the person in charge and makes a $25,000 cash donation, on the condition that they finish in the next 15 minutes. The dude just walks on stage, whips out a stack of cash the size of a Bible, and counts out 250 Benjamins on the spot. Also, his daughter's wedding wouldn't be late. Upgraded to first class recently on a flight that ended up delayed on the ground for an hour, wasn't even mad. A woman in front of me turned to her husband at one point and said, "Why don't you go have a word with the captain and see if you can get him to hurry up? Tell him who you are." I had no clue who he was, but at least he understood that that wouldn't work even if the woman he was with didn't. I've watched this happen. It was beautiful. The woman had serious plastic surgery and there was a 10 to 15 minute delay. She got incredibly angry and turned to her hubby-wubby and shouted loud enough for the stewardess nearby, "Do they know WHO we are?" The stewardess came over and the woman repeated herself and the stewardess said, "No ma'am." Have you ever witnessed someone's soul get shit on? I have, and it was marvelous. When I was a supervisor for Starbucks, we had a regular who ordered the same, extra modified Frappuccino every day, 3 times a day. She had to have it all the time and only liked getting them from a few stores. When she would go on road trips to her cabin, she would come in the night before and we would pre-make a whole bunch of Frappuccinos and not add ice or blend them. This would be so she could blend them in her car on the way there and back. Did the math, she spent over $8,000 per year on this shit. For the record, she was an heiress and only stayed home all day watching soap operas. Last year, I lived in university accommodations with a boy whose father was a high-ranking member of the Chinese government. Perhaps due to the fact that I was also Chinese, or as the result of the excess privileges lavished upon him from an early age, he immediately established me as his best friend, and started to stalk me to and from lectures, to the extent where I had to vary my routes every few days. I'm a girl, so it got, to say the least, a little disconcerting. Anyway, this chap was intelligent, however, had difficulties using common household appliances. He did not know how to use a microwave or a toaster. One day, at 10 p.m., I heard a rapid knock on my door, which of course, was this guy. He had microwaved a bowl of ramen in a ceramic bowl, and did not know how to get the bowl out because the ceramic was far too hot. Sarcastically, I replied that he had better let it cool. Half an hour later, he knocked on my door again, and started whining, in the most piteous of voices, that now the bowl was cool enough to handle, his ramen had also turned cold. A girl at my boarding school from Shanghai made instant noodles by putting the entire package in the microwave, without water, for 45 minutes. The fire ruined their kitchen for most of the year, but she was mostly mad because no one would make her noodles anymore. On the hill from Hampstead Tube Station, some Joan Collins 1980s clone of a woman parked her Range Rover outside a shop on a double yellow line, no parking on that road, with her hazard lights flashing. She was coming out of the shop carrying her fro little paper bags as a traffic warden was fixing the parking ticket to her window. She snatched it from the windscreen and said in a posh but aggressive voice, "I don't care. I can fucking afford it," threw the flapping paperwork into the vehicle and roared off down the hill. To most of us, parking meters and do not park signs and road paint are parts of society with a financial penalty to keep the system going. For this woman, it was like having a park where you like system that occasionally had a fee that made her bitchy and wasted the time it took to write out the check and post it for the fine. We should have the system they have in Finland, where traffic fines are based on the perpetrator's wealth or income, so millionaires have huge penalties while people with less money don't pay as much, though it is designed so it has a bad effect on any perpetrator. It's a good system. This is a really good idea and further proof that Finland doesn't really exist, because no sane, wealthy, ruling class would pass such a law that penalizes the rich worse than the poor. There was this incident I heard about a couple of years back about a local socialite who married into one of the richest and most powerful families here. The story goes that she was at a bank's main office to meet with the CEO. Instead of taking the elevator like a regular person, she had her bodyguards remove all the people inside the elevator so that she could go up alone without people bothering her. She said something along the lines of "Get out of my elevator." Funny thing is, one of the people she had forced out the elevator was the bank owner's wife, who decided to take another elevator with the rest of the people who were forced out. Once the socialite got to the office, the bank owner's wife was already there, and promptly told her to get out of her building. "Why would you take the train?" This is a sentence that led me to believe that a lot of rich people have lost touch with reality. Though they can still be good people. As I learned over the week. Several years ago I was a contractor in Afghanistan. I was in my early 20s and making a bunch of money. I decided I'd go to the Monaco Grand Prix. I flew from Dubai to Paris, then to Nice. On my flight to Nice I sat next to a Jordanian guy in his mid-30s. I could tell he had money because of his Patek Philippe watch that probably cost around $50,000. We got to talking and I jokingly said, "Nice watch. Private jet in the shop?" He laughed and said, "Actually my father is using it so I have to fly commercial." We chat for the rest of our flight about attending the Grand Prix and movies and whatnot. When we go to get our bags and I say my goodbyes, I tell him I gotta catch the train to Monaco that's leaving soon so I can get to my cheap-ass apartment I rented on the edge of town. He looks at me and just says, "Why would you take the train?" I tell him I can't afford a taxi so I have to take the train in, and he just says to take the helicopter with him. I put up a half-assed protest, who wouldn't want to take a fucking helicopter into the city, and eventually go with him. It ruled. He had his driver, who drove a fucking Rolls-Royce, drop me off at the apartment. We exchanged numbers even though I never expected to hear from him. The next day he invites me to the docks to attend a private party on a yacht. Lewis Hamilton was there. Fucking tens everywhere. Sadly I didn't get to hook up with any of them. What was originally supposed to be a few days of me hanging out and watching the races from the stands turned to me attending parties with celebrities and Formula One drivers and the richest of the rich. Hanging out in the pits and all sorts of cool shit. On one drunken night he confessed that he invited me because it's the first time in years someone treated him like a person. Not kissing his ass or being fake. I sorta felt bad for him. He didn't seem like he had any real friends. I'd be lying if I wasn't envious. But little things he said made it seem like he was completely oblivious to how everyone else lived. But I don't think I can really blame him. Several years ago a job of mine led me to encounter a person who had come from a wealthy background, had a cushy job with a successful company, and rarely interacted with those below his socio-economic level. He decided to weigh in on a conversation about the economy I was having with some people. His opinions sounded so stereotypical that I was waiting for him to use the term bootstrappy in a serious manner. The reason I share this is because he went on to say that with minimum wage what it was anyone could support themselves. He then revealed that he thought the minimum wage in the United States was $19.63 an hour. It took quite a bit of effort to convince him how wrong he was with that amount, and I respect him for accepting his mistake, but it blew the minds of everyone there that he could be so out of touch. I used to intern at a law firm that dealt in tax and estate management for high-net-worth individuals. Given the worm's eye view of the place that I had, I could only ever catch glimpses of our clients crazy, but suffice it to say most of our clients were absolutely batshit insane. Some examples. We had a respected spinal surgeon who also invented some medical equipment and who became convinced that he no longer needed to sleep or eat to survive. Instead of sleeping he would meditate for 2 hours a day and would eat vitamin pills instead of food, except for when he came to town for a meeting and made the firm take him out for a steak dinner. He was performing 2 or 3 operations a day in this state. We had a powerful CEO who became convinced that her rivals were trying to cast black magic curses on her and her family. She paid our $600 an hour attorneys to investigate shamanism for her to get to the bottom of it. We had another client who owns a major restaurant chain who shot his neighbor's dogs for coming onto his property. The neighbor was also wealthy and they both owned several hundred acres of land with no fence between them, and there was no livestock on the property, so he wasn't exactly trying to protect his chickens either. Not a client per se, but the wife of one of our clients ordered a hit on her husband. The hitmen she hired were so laughably incompetent that they didn't even come close to killing him. On the first attempt they shot out the windows of their house on a weekday afternoon when he was at work, and the second attempt they tailed him for a few miles but never did anything. She got so frustrated with their incompetence that she fired them and hired another hitman, who turned out to be an FBI informant. The reason for the hit? They had just started divorce proceedings and he was already seeing another woman who she feared was going to get her divorce settlement, which isn't even a thing. I wish I had more, but as an intern there I had very little client interaction and got most of this through hearsay and digging through client files for our attorneys. I should preface this saying I was born to a very wealthy family, the one who put a great emphasis on a strong work ethic and that eschews attention or special treatment. That being said, having grown up around people of great wealth my whole life, I can honestly say their entire reality is different from most people's. They are accustomed to a certain lifestyle that most people can't fathom. Take my best friend for example. He has been in South Carolina all summer at his 15,000 square foot beach cottage. When he shows up to his house in June he wants no transition period. That means no spending the first few days getting the summer house ready, unpacking, going to the grocery. He wants his life no different when he boards his Citation X in TX than when he lands in SC. To achieve this he has a handful of employees go a week ahead to SC and get everything ready. Deep clean the house, polish silver, manicure the grounds and on and on. They go to the store and buy food, drinks and all the sundries one would need for a summer vacation, sunscreen, toothpaste etc. They start unpacking the packages from Neiman Marcus containing his wife and kids' new summer wardrobes that they have never even seen because they were purchased by their private shopper, stylist. They train any new summer help and those who are staying with them like the chef and a personal assistant or two move into their small house a few miles away. Cars are readied, boats are docked, activities are planned also that he and his family do not have to waste time enjoying their vacation. For a summer spent at this lavish estate and having a rotating cast of family and friends come and visit, I imagine it costs about $1 million, not including private jet airtime or normal house maintenance. I was just there last month and asked to use a car to go play some golf. 5 minutes later there was a Chevy Suburban parked out front with our clubs already loaded. I go to put the car in drive and notice it only has 87 miles on it. It had just been purchased the day before in anticipation of a large group coming to visit. His time is valuable and he chooses to spend it a certain way. His disconnect from reality can be seen in how there is this massive effort behind the scenes so that he is not inconvenienced with things that most people would find mundane. Yes, it costs him millions of dollars to never have to go to the grocery or fill up with gas, but he will tell you it is worth every penny. One of the best things money can buy is saved time. I live in Hong Kong. Back in the early 2000s, a local gym fitness club changed their regulations so that only people with paid-up membership could enter the premises. Why? Because tai-tais, a colloquial term in Hong Kong for a wealthy married woman who doesn't work, were bringing their maids to the gym to help them undress and dress. The mainly Filipino maids would sit in the changing rooms for an hour or more while their employer did a class, then help them dress, dry hair, etc. when they came back. The gym basically wanted to get rid of the Filipinos sitting around in the change rooms, but the tai-tais simply bought them memberships. Maybe the fitness club guessed that would happen? Yeah, it's definitely a win-win for them. Either they get rid of all the random people milling about, or make a shitload more money. Sorry in advance for the weird phrasing, I'm trying to make the information as non-identifying as possible. Worked as a nanny for a 1% family. Saw some outlandish stuff. Remember having one parent complain how rude it was a friend had and offered to fly them to Miami on a private jet for a weekend getaway, and they were forced to go first class. Had the other parent tell me they thought it was really sweet. I was happy to help others and never be wealthy. I was working on a degree in social science. They would also spring last-minute trips on me and their kid all the time, so I'd stay in the main house with their child while the parents were country hopping. Poor kid never had any sense of who was going to be where. There were business-related videos of the parents on YouTube, so it got to the point where I'd play them on an iPad so the kid had some sense of consistency. This was a very young kid. Just to be clear, the kid was absolutely adorable and very sweet, which made it really hard to leave. I felt terrible, but it was pretty disheartening to think they'd probably turn out like their parents in a few years. Edited to add, the best part about the parent complaining over the first-class flight was when they asked me if I thought they were overreacting. Literally asked me, "Wouldn't you be upset? Don't you think that's rude?" They've been doing better, financially, now that they have Company X money. They could have sent a plane ECT, and I'm thinking, well, I'm pretty sure my entire year's salary couldn't pay for one chartered flight, so you know I'm probably not the best person to ask. My classmate got 3 traffic tickets in 2 consecutive days. About $700 total, including fees and whatever. He paid the fines without batting an eye and cheerfully said it was a good lesson to learn. Pretty sure I was more appalled and upset than he was. We had a girl who was infamous for bad parking and constant tickets at my private university. Finally, the school newspaper tracked her down and interviewed her about it. When asked how much her tickets amounted to, she said she didn't know because her grandparents just pay it all for her. No one was surprised. I am in no way rich, but I live very close to a rich area of London and went to school there with a lot of rich kids. Here are some of the things that I heard over the years. While we were talking about how annoying long plane journeys are, how small are your planes? My dad's plane has a double bed for me. Your plane must be tiny to not have any leg room. I don't understand. And when we said we don't have planes and use commercial airlines, but even on those planes there's lots of leg room, and then we had to explain that something lower than first class does exist, and the conditions aren't as nice. Once when I was annoyed that I had forgotten my lunch and thus had to go hungry, didn't have cash on me either, several people couldn't understand why I couldn't just go to the local Chinese restaurant, very overpriced, and order a meal from there. I'd have been dropping a good 15 pounds or so on lunch if I did that, and I didn't have that much to waste on food. They didn't understand why spending 15 pounds on food is a waste because they thought it was cheap but better than nothing. Some couldn't understand why I would want a pet cat rather than a horse. Horses are lovely, but they are so damn expensive that the average person cannot afford them nor land for them to live on. Most people did not understand this. They're not that expensive. I have enter amount of horses.